It is night and day. The difference in the sole is massive. This one just feels like it's so efficient and so fast. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a deep dive into my own bag for the season. We've done a recent what's in the bag and not really much has changed. But as I alluded to in that video, there's always a couple of spots in the bag for me that cause some difficulty, some challenges with regards to which clubs to pick. In that recent what's in the bag, I had talked about going back actually to my set pitching wedge, to the Mizuno 243 pitching wedge, and I had said that I was really struggling to hit my number with the Vokey, and I've openly talked quite a lot about how I struggle actually to reach the distances that sort of meet the gaps that I need from my irons. Specifically with the pitching wedge, I tend to hit them a bit shorter. So I felt that with the set pitching wedge, I could actually achieve that a little bit more. But recently, and I've always been a Vokey user, recently Vokey have introduced this brand new one, which is the 44-degree wedge, which obviously is a reaction and as a consequence to today's modern lofts with iron sets getting stronger and stronger, and not just within the kind of bigger cavity back game improvement irons. This is something that's much more prevalent even within the player's cavity irons. There's so much ball speed coming off these heads nowadays that they're creating so much elevation, and it's so easy to get the ball to peak higher that we're actually having to start to bring that down a little bit more and control those trajectories. So this is a new one that arrived at the door yesterday. This is what's in the bag right now. And ultimately, I'm trying to make the decision as to what are the benefits and consequences of going one over the other. Obviously very different from a design perspective. You've got a cavity back here, albeit pretty slim in profile, and hides all of its, I don't want to call it bulk, but it hides its help really, really nicely. And then you've got more of a traditional design, subtle movement of center of gravity, a little bit higher to drive ball flight down, the types of things we want from scoring clubs. Obviously so much more engineered into the face of a dedicated wedge like a Vokey, with the milling on the face, with the groove design, that type of thing. I've actually got a custom grind on the sole of this as well, which I really, really like. I think it helps me with turf interaction, get the club in and out the turf. So I'll be very curious to test a custom grind on the sole versus a standard grind on the sole with the wedge itself. If you take a cavity back, which obviously this one is, perimeter weighted and really much more weight at the bottom, it isn't actually how you would like to design a wedge. There's a reason all the companies who make specialist wedges are talking about this sort of, vertical CG adjustment, and really you do want it, a little bit higher in the wedges, which is quite hard to do when you make a cavity, right? So when you thin out the middle of that head, you are driving the mass down towards the sole of the club, whereas here, being much more of an evenly distributed design, you're going to get a little bit more of a higher CG position, which is advantageous. So let's dive in. Let's hit a few, and I'll talk you through some of the things that I think the launch monitor will reveal when it comes to a differentiating factor between a set wedge and a bespoke specialist wedge. Okay, guys, let's start with the set pitching wedge, Mizuno Pro 243. In a recent video we done where we explained how the appropriate gapping should occur within the set, we talked about the 5 miles an hour ball speed from wedge to 9 to 8 to 7. If you haven't seen that video, go back and check that one out. I think that's something that will be maybe a bit of an eye-opener in terms of how you should be gapping your clubs, and if you went and done your own gapping session, whether your clubs actually configure or conform to that progression. I think it's something that maybe isn't really talked about that much. So I always look at pitch and wedge. I try to be a 105 ball speed. I've got ball speed rather than club head speed. I'm more interested in what the ball's doing here rather than what my delivery is, path, angle of attack, face angle, that type of thing. So we've got the ball data up there. We're going to take a look at that. I'm concerned about ball speed, launch, and spin here. Those are the three for me. I want to see if the Cavity back launches a little higher, maybe spins a little less because the center of gravity is lower in the head. And also want to see from a ball speed, does the cavity back give me more ball speed retention than a blade? Those are all things that I'm curious about. I do have a little tendency with this wedge to go left. I have seen that. Better. Probably not a bad one to show a little bit of the forgiveness that you might get out of a cavity back that you might not get out of the blade, but we'll see. We really didn't sacrifice much at all there. A little bit of that pulley one again that I really don't enjoy. Okay, let's just go straight into the Vokey. Let's see what we see. Guys, we are matching up like for like on the loft. This is a 44. That is also 44 on the Mizuno. They are matched up exactly. So we shouldn't see that big of a discrepancy on ball speed and spin. And if we do, it's more of the center of gravity and the strike location relative to the CG that's going to cause that a little bit gear effect. We'd expect maybe this to come in a slightly flatter window. All right, let's take a look. It is interesting, and I've thought this in the past as I've used a 46-degree Vokey in the past, but to use a specialist wedge that now starts to look like an iron. As I say, I've had custom work done on the leading edge and on the sort of the curvature radius of that leading edge. I've had it straightened out because I really like, and people talk about, some guys talk about loving offset. I don't like offset. I want that transition off of the lead side of the hosel. I want that to transition straight through the leading edge of the golf club. I don't like to see from the hosel go down, then it comes in, and then you get the curvature, the radius of that leading edge. I do not like, I like it in a 60 so that if I open the face a little bit, the face still looks square, but I do not like it on a wedge at all. Wow, quite a lot more spin, 88.94. Off the top of my head, we'll check when we look at the table at the end. I think we were averaging about 82 with the Mizuno. I'm not sure if you guys will be able to pick up with the audio differences between the two. Immediately, this one feels so much more solid than the Mizuno Wedge. I think it's interesting that we are getting that much more spin. It's 800 RPM more than the average with the other one. Ball speed hasn't yet shown any deterioration, so we're able to keep everything that we would want. The velocity that keeps us in good standing with the rest of the set, but more spin that gives us control, being able to flight up or down, stop it. More importantly, on partial shots, are we able to retain spin on partial shots? Something I also want to do in this test, because I think it's one thing testing full shots, but if we go down to having to maybe flight one down or something like that and manipulate the wedge a little bit, that's when the versatility of the specialist wedge will really show its sort of star quality in that environment. I mean, it's night and day. It really, on full shots, it feels way easier with the Vokey. I mean, I pulled one of those 5. Bit of an outlier, to be honest. It really was relative to the other 4. I mean, if we disable that one for a second, we see the other ones. 2.2 left, 2.4 left, 2.1, 2.4. They're identical. They're absolutely identical. If you go to that compare page a second, I mean, yeah, so in actual fact, they both performed really, really well in the standard deviation. I know I'm definitely favouring the Vokey in terms of the less left bias, but that in terms of standard deviation and spin is brilliant. 148. Now, the fact that we've even bettered it slightly, obviously amazing too. And really in all categories, whether it's ball speed, launch, spin, you know, carry distance averages, it's better in every which way. It's a little bit higher in launch, but purely just because the face was getting a bit more closed in the Mizuno. That's the only reason that launch angle is slightly lower on the Mizuno. But it felt to me like it was night and day easier to control the Vokey wedge through the strike, through the ball flight. And if we're really not getting any extra from having the cavity back, where it's forgiveness on a mishit, anything like that, I think it's a fairly easy win in this round for the Vokey in the decision. All right, let's hit some partial shots. All right, guys, let's look at the partial swings. Let's look at 100 yards, which for me is you're definitely a knockdown. Not probably it's just slightly less than 3/4, but I think it'll be really interesting to see on those partials what happens. Looking at two things: the face from a spin consistency standpoint, and really the sole as well. And if the sort of customized sole on the Vokey gives me any advantages. Obviously, this is, you know, we've got to talk about the lie, and this is a perfect situation, a perfect lie. We're not giving ourselves some challenging situations like you would in the golf course with tighter lies or thicker lies, wet lies, that type of thing. Again, I go back towards more things are in the favor of the specialist wedge in that. And I know I probably seem like I'm very biased towards the Vokey right now. It's just the truth, guys. If you have an engineered wedge that has the design to disperse debris, moisture, anything, grass, dirt, all that sort of stuff, you know, the face on this wedge is really designed with the same intent as the 7-iron, as the 4-iron. It doesn't really have specialist design when it comes to that. Okay, 100 yards. See if I can dial this back a little bit. Okay. It is night and day. The difference in the sole is massive in terms of the quality of contact, in terms of the efficiency of it. Like, I can feel the Mizuno one kind of bounce off the ground as it's hitting the ball, and it's kind of bouncing up. This one just feels like it's so efficient and so fast through the strike. Feels so different. Do it. Ridiculous. All right, guys, I'm really glad we done the partial swings because I really, and there's my thinking that if we done some partial swings, it could show a bigger difference. I just think when you're swinging at full speed and you've got more shaft lean, typically you have that in a full swing, it can expose, or it doesn't expose the differences in sole design quite as much. But then you guys seen it in the differences. My first reaction to the 2 or 3 shots with the Vokey hitting partial shots with this sole, it felt like as a surgeon going in to do intricate surgery with a scalpel versus a hammer. That's the best way I can describe it to you. It felt clumsier doing it with the set wedge. That's a bit of a crude analogy, but it felt like I could be so precise on the strike with the Vokey that it was obviously going to reflect so much more in the standard deviation. So we did retain more spin, even though we didn't hit it quite as far. So we were 8 feet in proximity with the Vokey. We were nearly 21 feet with proximity with the Mizuno Wedge. The difference in proximity ultimately is going to directly affect your make percentage on the greens. 20 feet, 21 feet in and around there, you're going to make just under 15%, or the PGA Tour, not even us, the mere mortals out there, PGA Tour players are going to make less than 15% of their putts from outside 20 feet, 21 feet. From inside 10 feet, we know the stats from 10 feet are about 40%, and at 8 feet, which is what the Vokey was averaging in proximity, it's closer to 50 feet. So you've either got 15 with the Mizuno, you're going to have 15 feet make percentage with your next shot, or you've got 50% make percentage with the Specialist Wedge. There's no downside on the ball speed. There's only upside on the spin retention and control. When you get a partial shot, obviously, there's advantages there. We're talking about this in a perfect lie environment. We've already said this face will be more advantageous when you get into those more challenging scenarios, different lies, different conditions, water, sort of debris, any of that sort of stuff, rough lies. There's no downside to this. And to anyone who's considering extending their wedge set and going with something that's more of a specialist wedge, I do think this 44-degree option has opened that up so much more. I think the 46 relative to the way 9 irons and 8 irons and the way the set was being designed still left a bit of a gap. Even if you strengthen it, but when you strengthen it, you lose that degree of bounce. You just changes the integrity of the sole a little bit. I just love that this is now an option. And for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. Like I said, I feel like a surgeon has so much more control over contact and impact, which is exactly what I want with wedges when I'm trying to be precise about control. So easy, no-brainer for me, guys, when it comes to which club. It's been one I've debated for the longest time. But when I saw the 44 come out from Vokey, I knew that, okay, this has to be tried and tested, because I think that's the one, and without a shadow of a doubt, that's become the case. So food for thought for lots of you. I know lots of you will be using a loft progression that probably makes a 44-degree wedge an option. Something to try. I think more specialists now are going to be carrying these for testing. I would encourage all of you to go out there who are struggling with distance control with your wedges, explore this a little bit and get into the nuance of specialist wedges versus set wedges. I think you could stand to gain some pretty good dispersion control, all the things we've talked about in this video. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this. My bag is one club closer to being complete. There's one more club that I'm really not sure about, and there's actually another one that's popped up. I thought I was pretty sure about my putter, but it turns out the case I'm not. So we'll be maybe testing that at some point down the line also. But we do have one more video before the 13 full clubs that I would hit from more full shots are established in their positions. So stay tuned for that. If you don't already subscribe, please do. More than half of you who watch these videos are not subscribers. Come on along for the journey. Why not? If there's content like this that you really enjoy and you get value out of it, your value back to us and a thank you or some return to us, become a subscriber, join us on the journey. It really means a lot. All right, stay tuned for more. We'll see you again soon.